Hey everyone, Steve here with Phantom History. Thanks so much for checking us out on YouTube, and if you enjoy our content, make sure you subscribe. Hey everybody, Steve here in the Phantom History House Library. Really excited to the women of Nine Lives Paranormal. I have Kara and Gail with me, and we're going to talk about the Shanley Hotel, which is in New York, I believe, if I remember
Yep.
correctly. But before we jump into that, thank you both for joining me tonight to chat for this episode of Phantom History. It's a pleasure to meet you both.
Pleasure to meet
Pleasure
you.
to meet
Happy to be
you.
here.
I love how the paranormal community can come together and we can kind of talk about some of our favorite experiences and haunts. But before we dive into the hotel, I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about yourselves and a little bit about Nine Lives Paranormal. How long have you been around? How did you start? All that good stuff.
Good. Go ahead, you go start.
Okay. So I'm Gail. I've been investigating for about 8 years now. Actually originally from a little town in Missouri called Joplin, Missouri, which is steeped in folklore. The Missouri Ozarks have all kinds of legends, and we have the spook light and the Missouri Howler. And my brother and I grew up running around in Peace Church Cemetery investigating with our little recorders. And so I come by it honestly. And then when I moved here and met Kara, um, uh, I realized that New Jersey is just as weird as Missouri, and that there were a lot of things here to investigate. So one of the first things we ever did together was investigated Mid Orange Correctional Facility with another group. And so as we started doing this with groups, we decided that, you know what, hey, we could do this ourselves. And so we started Nine Lives Paranormal, and I'll segue to you, and you can talk a little bit about how that came about.
Yeah. So, like she said, I'm Kara. And I've been investigating maybe about the same as Gail. And I grew up in a very strict Jersey stereotypical Italian household. And they also, but in culturally, we had a lot of customs and traditions that were folk magic based. We didn't talk about it being folk magic based, but we would just practice these things, like cracking the egg and pendulum kind of swinging and things like that. So as I grew older and I did a deep dive into my own culture and heritage, I found how much of my growing up was part of being in so much paranormal stuff. And so then that turned me on to it. And after that, we decided after we met, we were going to start doing our own investigations, our own lectures, and do paranormal investigating that's responsible ethically, and start teaching people that there's more to it than what you just see on TV.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we some people I think find the investigations that we would go on a little bit intimidating. These are hardcore investigators, and we go to these places that they don't have electricity. It's usually either boiling hot or freezing cold. We've all got like our tactical gear and lamps. We're ready to go. And the average person thinks it's interesting, but a little intimidating. So we said, let's take baby steps. Let's show people that it doesn't have to be scary. One of our lecture series is bringing ghost hunting out of the darkness into the light, meaning it's not like what you see on TV. And we wanted to show people the appropriate use of the equipment and to do it ethically and safely, and also never forget that there's humanity involved. We are investigating the spirits of loved ones past. So we wanted to make sure that people didn't use provoking, that they were always respectful to the spirits that they were trying to investigate with. They did it safely, and that they weren't disappointed if they didn't always catch hardcore evidence, because they got to learn the history of the place. You always meet amazing people on this journey, so there's just a lot more to it than running around in the dark with our headlights, screaming.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned the history because, of course, the podcast I do is called Phantom History, and I always joke that if you're going to haunt me, that's fine, but I want to know who you are. I want to know the
Exactly.
background of who I'm dealing with.
It's like, let's sit
Um,
down and have some tea. Tell me who you are.
so how long has Nine Lives Paranormal been in existence now?
Believe it or not, we've formalized. We've only been around about, it's going to be, well, it's a little bit shy of a year,
Okay.
we've really,
It's taken off.
it's taken off, and we do pretty much, we do events, more than one event a month. So either their investigations, our next investigation on Jersey side, we're doing it to benefit the Carney Cottage, which is in New Jersey. So we do the historical locations, and the money goes directly to the historical location, and we bring people on those. But we do at least, like I said, 2 events a month, whether they're lecture series, bringing people to locations and talking about the history, or we're doing a private investigation for somebody that, wants to know more about what could be happening in their home or establishment.
And that's what I love about these investigations, those that are done ethically, to say what you say is to, you save these historical locations, they get some funding, people learn about the history, and they can continue to thrive, which I love. And I know that the Shanley Hotel, for example, is a historic location.
Yes.
I'm guessing not too far from where you live. Am I right?
It's about what, 90 minutes?
About 90 minutes,
About
yeah.
90 minutes.
Okay.
It's about 90 minutes into New York, because we're in the Jersey side, but that would be, yeah.
Okay.
Going to Hudson Valley.
So way closer than I am down here in Tampa. It would take me a
Yeah,
little while.
closer than you.
That's a good thing. So you've investigated the Shanley Hotel a few times, if I remember.
Multiple times, yeah. Mhm.
Okay. So of course the bottom line is the place really haunted? Are there
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very historical. Eleanor Roosevelt actually used to stay there. You want to talk a little bit about the history? You
yeah.
probably know more than I do.
Yeah, so the place itself has always been a magnet for socialites and people that have been, that are the well-to-do people, right? And actually, I think it was Times Square was supposed to be actually originally called Shanley Square for the Shanleys that used to that because they were such big wigs. And they had diplomats, they had presidents, and everybody there. And over the years, the property has changed hands and is also changed in terms of, how do you want to say it, environment. So it went from a home, it went to a speakeasy and a brothel. It was, yeah, it was a speakeasy and a brothel. It was a gentleman's club, and now it currently still runs as a haunted hotel. You can stay there and whatever. And it's changed hands, and most people who take it on after it has been, after it's been, whatever, bequeathed to whomever or whatever, develop such an attraction to this place that it becomes everything that they've ever wanted. So the people who have owned the house prior to the person who has it's named Kelly, prior to them, she speaks to the prior owners through various means because nobody wants to leave. It's always been a party.
That's amazing. So
Yeah.
so it doesn't sound like it's a scary place. It sounds like it's a very social haunted.
Well,
It has its moments.
it has its moments because when it was a speakeasy and a brothel, it did attract organized crime.
Yeah.
And so there are some more dominating spirits. There are spirits that like to watch over the working girls that are there. There are women of the evening that haunt. There are also spirits of children because there were 2 deaths of 2 children on the property. So it really runs a gamut. If you look at the paranormal in terms of levels in time, you have children who were there first and passed away. Then as it went through time, it had more of an organized crime kind of feel to it. You have those spirits, and it just keeps going to the old owners that had it maybe like a decade ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it definitely has both residual
And
and
intelligent hauntings.
Okay, and that was going to be my question because I know a lot of investigators have their own way of investigating, but a few things always seem to be a staple, is, distinguishing the residual from the intelligent hauntings. Usually it's with equipment or with a psychic medium. What is your process usually like when you go into a place like the Shanley Hotel to investigate? Are you all equipment based? Are you psychic medium based, or a little bit of both? How does that work?
So we're a little bit of both. We like to kind of cover all our bases and incorporate everything. The Shanley itself, though, there have been psychic mediums there during our investigations, but we've not taken any of the folks that we know. The first thing we do, whether we're actually conducting an investigation or going on an investigation with other people, is we try to do a deep dive into the history. The cool thing about the Shanley is Kelly has specifically a room set up with seating, and she shows like a film that goes through all the history of the location, like a slideshow. It goes through all the history of the location. So that is really nice. So you know what you're getting into before you ever go. But she's the intuitive. I'm the tech.
Okay.
So I'm the healthy skeptic. We use a wide variety of equipment from things like dowsing rods and pendulums because we found that, especially places that don't get a lot of investigating, the spirits aren't sure how to manipulate the equipment. We'll explain it to them, but it's frightening a lot of times. So if we go in with a pendulum and a dowsing rod, these are things that they're familiar with, depending on when they passed, that aren't intimidating. And then we can work our way up to the more complicated pieces of equipment. As far as the equipment goes, tried and true, try to get EVPs. Then we'll get a little bit more, uh, we'll go into the next level and get a little more complicated with the SLS cameras. We have REM pods, we have Phasma. We have a lot of have you ever heard of Phasma Box, that computer program?
I have, yes. And
We have a lot of good communication with that. Gosh, yeah, we've the paranormal portal, of course, SB7.
We do a lot of Estes method.
We do Estes method, and then we do double Estes method, where we'll sit two people back to back. One will do an AM sweep upward, one will do an FM sweep downward, and that way we know there's not going to be any cross contamination. And a lot of times we'll actually get two spirits having a conversation with each other through the SB7, and that's fascinating to watch.
Yeah. And we just started incorporating SB7 with spirit art. So instead of communicating verbally, we will go into automatic writing while we're doing it. So we kind of play with a bunch of different things. Mm-hmm.
And that's amazing because to your point, I think you were saying, Gail, earlier, is, these spirits are not, 2024 personalities. They don't know what a lot of this stuff is, and you kind of ease into that. I think that's really a cool concept and a cool way to do that. Since you have investigated this location a few times, is there like a spirit or an entity that you regularly encounter, or is it somebody different every time?
No,
They're the regulars. Yeah.
Yeah. Which one do you want to talk about?
You go ahead.
Well, okay. So in order to explain it, I actually have to explain the hotel to you a little bit. So the first floor of the hotel is the gentleman's quarters, and that's where the bar and where men used to crash. And it's just one big room, and they have beds, right, that you can just crash on. So in that, and that's also where they show their little film on where you can, about the history. So down there has more of that party energy because that was the gathering room. So down there, you usually get Frank, or you get Frank, who can be who does not like women in the gentleman's quarters, so he could be a little spicy when there's women down there because the gentleman's quarters was used for gambling and drinking, and then they would go upstairs to the women of the evening. So if the women come downstairs, he doesn't really like it that much. So then when you go upstairs, there's the series of bedrooms that you can now stay in as well. So you go upstairs, and then there's one room where Joe resides. Joe can also be a little spicy. It seems that the men seem to be a little bit more spicy, and they're more protective of the women. So he's more like a bouncery kind of personality. And the farther you go, if you go upstairs to where there were the two women that used to stay up there, but those were also the children's bedrooms when it was a domicile. So you can go into Rosie's room, which was the little girl, and she likes to play with toys and set off the cat balls or whatever. And then various women of the evening, you can communicate with them, and you can ask them, they'll tell you to leave them money. Or alcohol. You get the vote,
Right. So, and I love that you have these names. So I think you said Frank downstairs
Right.
was the first one. Do you know his backstory? Do we know who he was in life?
In terms of who he was, we don't know who he was. We know that there was a person named Frank, and we actually, if you talk to the owner, it was Frank who committed murder. They feel that he, in terms of he had a job that was, how do I word this diplomatically? He had a job that was not recognized by the general government of being a taxpayer. A taxpayer. He was more like a mafioso kind of guy.
Okay.
And so they do feel that he committed a lot of murders on behalf of other people to pay debts, and things like that. In terms of, and also there, Frank was also the owner's name.
Yes.
And not to be confused with Frank, who used to be one of the owners. Frank, who used to be one of the owners of the place, up more modern, will also come through.
But you know the difference.
You know the difference because he'll say, play the piano for me. He'll tell people I say hi. He mentions names and he'll say, I'm sorry. He'll, gives more definitive information on things going on in the store, in the hotel, as opposed to Frank Mafioso guy who, will say things like, I play in the gentleman's quarters. I will play 21 with them. And I take the cards and I deal them, and then I put either EMF detectors or track lighting or something, and I have them hit or stay and let them light up, if they want to hit or stay. And depending on who I have, if it's Frank, Frank will bow out and not want to play, and he'll tell me to get out. He'll tell me to get out. He's just like, get out. So you know who they are.
Okay.
So
Yeah, and people consistently on equipment get these same names over and over, which I find
Frank,
really
Joe,
fascinating.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it can't be, it's much more than a coincidence, it sounds like. It's
Correct.
Yeah.
obviously the intelligent spirits that are coming through.
Right.
And you said, and I want to talk about Joe in a minute, but you mentioned the little girl,
Yes.
who you said was there when it was like a family home.
Yes.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
do we know what her story
She,
is and what
yeah,
happened?
she fell in, there is a well on the property, and she fell in the well.
Hmm.
And she passed away. There was also another little boy on the property who was tragically run over by his own father. His father was a barber when the place was, more of a hotel, and they provided a barber on site for the men who stayed there. And he lived there with his family, and he tragically ran over his own son. The little boy passed away.
Now, do we have like a time frame on these children? Like how long ago was this? Was this more recent?
Shanleys, Beatrice and James Shanley, they had a large family. Their first daughter, Kathleen, only lived to be about 6 months old. James Shanley lived 4.5 months, and William Shanley died at a little over 9 months. Tragedy was not limited to the Shanley family. The barber, Peter Gregor, whom James hired to live in the Shanley Hotel with his family, his youngest daughter, Rosie, was only 3 years old when she passed. She fell into the covered well. Her body was found nearly 2 hours later. In September of 1915, another tragic moment occurred for Dr. Walter Nelson Thayer. He was backing his car out of the alley that ran between his home and the hotel, and his 5-year-old son, Walter Nelson Thayer, jumped onto the running board only to fall off again, and the car backed over him, and he suffered a severe head injury. But he did not die from the incident. For many years, people believe the boy was the spirit affectionately called Jonathan that plays in the attic. If he wasn't the victim of a car accident, then who is that little boy?
So
Uh,
so Rosie
okay.
and the little boy date back to like the early 1900s. Then as
Correct.
Yes, 1918-ish.
okay.
In that area. But at the same time that it's such a paradox because at the same time, historically speaking, because there's all this tragedy, but at the same time, like they had the inaugural ball for the Roosevelts at the house, and they had when the people who owned it that were married, they did a huge like ticker tape parade through the town for them, so and when you go there, it's funny because you and in terms of paranormal experience, it's like you go there and you feel like you don't want the party to stop.
But to what she said, to what Kara said, the first time I went to the Shanley, they were doing an investigation. They had a psychic. They were doing like a potluck. Okay,
They want it to be reminiscent of like a roaring 20s kind of thing.
so everyone was supposed to bring a covered dish, and we're riding down there. We're cynical. We're like, I'm not going to eat other people's food. That's just weird. And we're talking about it, and we're like, so we get there and we get in and we start talking to these people from many different backgrounds, people that normally probably wouldn't necessarily get along, but there's something about the house. Like Kara said, it wants the party to keep going. So we find ourselves like eating everyone's food and everyone's eating our food and we're not thinking anything about it. And, you know, people are just that normally wouldn't get along are investigating together and everybody's hugging and everybody loves everybody else. It's almost like being intoxicated.
It's like an euphoria.
It is. You get like euphoric. And so we finally, when the weekend was over and we were leaving, and we got about 15 miles down the road, and I turned to Kara and I said, "What just happened?" And she said, "I'm not sure." But it was like kind of like coming out of a deep sleep. We're like, "What?" It was the most bizarre feeling. Like we had just been caught up in this whole euphoric thing with the house. And then once we got far away from it, it kind of lifted. But it also, like, for weeks after, we wanted to go back, like immediately.
That's why
we wanted that feeling again.
Yeah,
It's
very interesting.
I've never been investigated any place that had that kind of effect. It's like the house draws you in and it wants the party to keep going.
It's fun.
And I love that the house has that kind of personality, for lack of a better word, because you said it was an inauguration house and it had these ticker tape parades for brides and grooms and what have you. Is there any entity in there that worries you or scares you, or do you have a moment where you were in there where you said, "Holy crap, this is terrifying"? Because it all sounds very positive so far.
The basement.
The basement.
It's always the basement.
It's always the basement.
It's always the basement. No, but let me explain that the basement was a morgue. Because during the winters up here, and especially they're in the Catskills, like close to the Catskills, the ground freezes, so they couldn't bury the dead. So they would keep them in the basement of the Shanley Hotel. So there's a morgue in there. And now the way it's set up, it looks like a regular, basement, unfinished. It's got the stone walls, and everything. There is the place that is the morgue. There's set back. It's deep, and back there it's all dirt. And then there's like a little alcove. And there is something down there that we were told that keeps it. Sorry, I didn't do that for you. There's something down there that keeps the children there. And I can tell you that I don't know why I'm always doing the basement. I have no idea. They just send me to the basement, So I always end up doing the basement. They will not allow you to do the basement without one of the staff members from the Shanley present with you. So I've never done the basement by myself, unless a Shanley owner or staff member is with me helping to lead the group. Okay. They say it's because of more safety because the hot water heater and stuff is down there. But after spending time down there and seeing the action that you get, you need more than one person in case somebody else gets affected. Because whatever is there, whatever you want to call it, a negative energy, an entity that keeps I don't know what you call it. I do not like to place labels on things, but it lurks back there and it will bully you. So it will come up to you. It will pull on your hair. It will give you threatening messages on Phasma portal. It will tell you explicitly what it will do to you.
It will rush up to your face.
It'll rush up to your face, and it's I one of the times that I investigated there, I actually brought my son, who at the time he was 17, now he's 19. And I brought my son and I told him when they put me in the basement, I said, listen, if shit gets real, I'm sending you upstairs, and he's like, what? And I'm like, just trust me. And so we had the music box out, that ding, 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 or whatever. And we had the portal out and the GS2. I don't know if you're familiar with the GS2.
Laser grid.
It's like a laser grid, but it also has heat sensors on it. So
Wow.
it could show you a cold spot or a heat signature, depending at the same time. So if you're lucky, and
It's like radar.
yeah. So if something goes in front of it, you could actually see it, see the squares go across. So anyway, as I digress, so the music box is going off and it's going ding 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 ding, and the heat signature thing the cold spot thing is going off. And my son says to me, he goes, if that cat ball goes out, I'm going goes out. It's like, I'm out of here. He's like, I'm out. So then the portal said light, and then it said light, and the GS2, if things get close to it, there's a sensor in a circle that goes around it. So as things get closer, it'll go click 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 click,
And it'll tell you
and it'll tell
which
you
side.
which side it's on. And when it's right in its face, it'll turn bright red or white. So it said light, the thing went click 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 click, and it turned white, and then it died. I said to my son, I was like, get out.
Upstairs.
I was like, go upstairs. I was like, go upstairs and hang out up there. And I said, and I will come back because it just went left. I was like, it just went left, And I think too, that's one of the harder things about when you do an investigation and there's other people with you, that like sometimes when you do tours and things like that, things go left and you have to keep a happy face, and you're kind of like, oh, this is bad.
You have to pivot.
You have to pivot, it's kind of like pivot, but yeah. So that was, I would think,
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
called it, you said you don't like to put labels on it, but your best guess, is this a former resident? Is it a former human? Is it not human? What is your take?
I don't think it's human.
Yeah, I'm sure that everyone who's been there has their own opinions on it, and I'm sure the owners have their own opinions. My personal opinion about what's in the basement is that it is an elemental. And I'm not going to go as far as demon or anything like that. I believe it's an elemental. I believe it came with the land.
Mhm.
There's a lot of running water and limestone in that area. And I think that whatever this is it's neither good nor bad. It just is. And it's very ancient. And it is, over the years, been taught to crave activity and attention. And I think that is what draws people in and gives you that euphoric effect and draws you back, because for lack of a better word, I think that it is lonely and it wants to keep that party going. It wants that energy. It feeds off that energy. And again, I don't think that's either good or bad. I think it's ancient and probably beyond what we can comprehend. But I think that over, the years, centuries, yeah, but it's probably been taught by all the activity that went on there that it enjoys that energy,
Yeah,
and wants to keep that going.
And I find that so fascinating because I've studied elementals before, and I think there's the concept and the idea of them are eerie and creepy, but also very respectful, and
Mhm.
Native Americans and beyond, all
Mhm.
of that history. So Gail, I guess to kind of follow up on what you're talking about, do you think that being, for lack of a better word, that's there is kind of what's running the house, keeping those other spirits there, having them be active, or is that a completely separate thing?
I think, it makes sense to me that because it does have that effect of pulling people in, we're energy, our souls, for lack of a better word, are energy. So it makes sense to me that it is keeping those souls there, to continue to do what they do and help it draw people in. I think it's, again, beyond what we can comprehend, but it's smart enough to know that this is now what causes people to come, the spirits of these the deceased that we can investigate. So yeah, I think it does keep them around. Um, I don't know that all of them. I think some of them. I think especially the children. I think a lot of that is residual.
Mhm.
I personally think that almost always children go to the light. I think a lot of what people think might be an intelligent child haunting is not a child. Um, Perhaps an adult that wants to ingratiate itself, or maybe even be less threatening, or maybe even if for to be nefarious, who will present itself as a child. But for me personally, I just think that children's souls are pure. I think they go directly to the light. But yeah, to circle back around on what your question was, yeah, I do think that this elemental does keep those spirits hanging around for its own devices.
Yeah. Not, I'm sorry to interrupt. And I'm not quite sure having been there so many times, it's like sometimes, now don't get me wrong, there are different personalities to each of the spirits when you communicate, and you can definitely tell the difference between Joe and Frank, and you can definitely when you're communicating with them. But whatever is there, being so ancient and having centuries to learn the behavior of people, I'm not so sure if we're dealing with the same thing who puts on a different face for different reasons to interact with different people.
Hmm.
So, we always say what you put out is what you get back when you're doing on an investigation. So if we're going into a place with something that has been around and learned human behavior for hundreds of years and really doesn't have a conscience because it
Beyond that.
it's beyond that, there's nothing really to say that, okay, what you put out, you want to talk to Rosie, Joe, Frank, I'm going to give you that. So it's a very interesting and complex place when you start going multiple times and you start watching people that you're investigating with and how they're approaching it. Because everybody walks away feeling euphoric, but at the same time, when it comes to the investigation, everybody walks away with something different.
Which is so fascinating because, like you said, there's a lot of history there, and I kind of love that everybody has their own personalized experience because of whatever's going on there. And I'm curious, Gail, for you, while you send Kara to the basement to investigate, and you're investigating elsewhere in the house, have you had any experiences that have freaked you out personally that weren't necessarily in the basement?
I think probably when we were with a group, it was the same night that we had the potluck, and we were all in. And it's actually the room initially was unfinished. It's now the room that Kelly shows the slideshow in, but at the time it was an unfinished room, and it was several of us, and a psychic. And Kara was there too. We hadn't relegated her to the basement yet. Um, and Kara's like, did you say that? And there was this shadow figure. It was crawling on the wall, crawled down the wall.
And it smelled like deer pig.
Yeah, it was a rancid smell. Um, and that was the same. Then right after that, did you get your hair pulled?
My hair was pulled.
Yeah. But yeah, seeing that shadow figure crawl on the ceiling, and it's one of those moments for me. I'm very much about using the equipment, trying to quantify it, trying to prove it or disprove it, and to see this thing with my own eyes. And of course, I had nothing that could pick it up, and I'm just like, wow, I can't believe I'm seeing. One, I'm freaked out about seeing it, and two, I'm thinking, no one's ever going to believe this.
And the fact that you both saw it is
Yeah.
amazing. Did anybody else in the room notice it, or was it just the two of you?
Other people saw it at different times because it was crawling, and they would say like because when you do an investigation, people are sometimes scared to say out loud because they think it's their eyes, they think it's whatever. And it's not until that one person says, "Did you see that?" that other people start to say, you go, I thought it was a shadow. I thought it was, my phone going off. I thought it was, and it's like, no, no, you know, but but other people did see it. It was, I could still see it. It was across from us, and then the people on the across from us saw it over on by us. It was very interesting. It's a very interesting place. If I were to say, you wanted like a medium level haunt, not like, where, a super scary or like a base level, medium haunt. Yeah, Shanley. The Shanley doesn't disappoint. Every time
No,
you're there, and even in terms of location, it's deep in the Hudson Valley where they have UFO experiences. It's in the Catskills, which I mean, you pull up to the place and your whole you feel the pressure on your body when you go there. It's very interesting.
Well, I've heard when I've done some of these other episodes before, talking to other paranormal investigators with all kinds of backgrounds, sometimes the term um, vortex or portal or those
Mhm.
words are used. Is that part of what's going on here, or do you have any idea? And if you don't
Yeah,
know, that's fine too.
no, no, no. They say that upstairs there is a portal on the middle floor where the unfinished rooms are. There is a room because when you go there, the money for the investigations goes to restoring it. There are some rooms that are, yellow taped off that you can't go into. Um, but it just so happens in that area, they feel that it's the go figure, it's the doll room. There's a room with dolls, and they feel that there is a vortex and a portal in there. I will tell you that and it's hard to say, getting things on camera is one thing, but when you're like me personally, when I'm dealing with a vortex or a portal, it's more of a sensation, So, like, you could go into one of these. The only thing that I was able to actually get on, documented evidence was temperature fluctuation on it. But when you go there, you feel off balance. You walk into the room and you literally feel unbalanced. Like you don't feel like you have your footing. It's, you could be sitting down and your dowsing rods will spin, and you will be standing there, and then all of a sudden you'll go, ooh, like you just feel like like if my ankle get out, you're like, ooh, so you just kind of fall, but and you can't stay too long up there, or at least I can't, because then you like people say I get a headache or or what have you. But yeah, they do feel that there is a portal or a vortex upstairs.
Another interesting aspect of the house is that they have a scrying room.
Oh yeah.
They have a room with a mirror that you can go in, and people have gotten some pretty interesting pictures
In the scrying mirror.
from the scrying mirror. I don't think I've ever been any other place and investigated where they have an actual scrying room. So that's very interesting too.
Yeah, and I love that the owner has embraced the paranormal side of this
Yeah.
location.
Oh, absolutely.
And it sounds like that she, I believe,
Yeah,
I remember hearing a female name, that she is a believer and
Mhm.
wants to, of course, the money helps with the home and the historic
Mhm.
side, great. But I
Mhm.
know a lot of historic places like will turn away from the haunted side because they
right.
don't want to freak anybody out. So this is refreshing to hear that it's so embraced in this location.
Yeah,
Mhm.
she believes that she is a steward of their message.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
she goes to great lengths to care, for lack of a better word, them and protect them from people who have ill intention coming in, because sometimes that does happen.
As
Um,
did the previous owner, Sal,
yeah,
who she purchased the property from. He was the same way. He was very much, a friend to the spirits and was not shy about saying so.
yeah,
And it
yeah.
sounds like Frank, who is still there, was the same
Mhm.
way.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. And he Sal also when the place was abandoned and dilapidated, and when he bought it and he was fixing it up, and as he was fixing it up, he realized that the place was not really empty.
Hmm.
And he totally changed his
His
plan,
vision.
his vision to from being, a money making, place and, or whatever, to restoring it back to what it was and making a home for those that are still there.
And that there's something really beautiful about that because we're so quick to bulldoze and start over or, reconstruct and, it's the same place, but it's not really. So it's really neat that he was able to do that and it's continuing now. And I mean, I've seen pictures of the Shanley. How big would you say it is? It doesn't look huge from what
It's
I've
not
seen.
huge.
It's
Um,
I mean, I don't know how many feet would you square feet would you 3,000 maybe.
3,000 square feet,
Oh,
maybe.
okay.
Yeah,
And there's how many rooms upstairs?
let's see,
Right.
maybe five, but there's some that like five usable.
Ah,
There's more, but you
Where
can't.
it says how many rooms.
She's gonna look.
yeah,
Um,
there you go.
there's five usable upstairs that I would say Rosie's room. And Joe has a chair, just so you know. And there's a chair
Okay.
that Joe sits in, okay? And you can't sit in Joe's chair because if you sit in Joe's chair, he gets very angry. So there is a room that just has a chair in it, and if you sit in it, usually you get some sort of threatening message. You start to feel very heavy on your chest. People start to cough. That he like is, get out.
He's a little
So,
territorial. And you said he's the one that is protective of the women of the night upstairs.
correct. Yes.
Okay. So he dates back to that era of the Shanley.
Hmm. Yeah.
Did you investigators name him Joe, or did he tell you?
No, Joe comes through. Joe, Frank, all the names that we're using, Joe, Frank, Rosie, those are all the names that consistently come through on communicate and devices and have been coming through more so than with just us, just with repeated investigations. When we first started going in there, we were already told that it was Joe, Frank, and Rosie and whomever. And then as we did our investigations, those were the same names that came through.
Mhm.
So we have Anna's room in the bordello area, Maddie's room in the bordello area, Rosie's room in the bordello area, the Roosevelt room on the second floor, the Oscar Grover room on the second floor, the Rose room on the second floor, the Silent room on the second floor, and Marguerite's room, who we got frequently, on the second floor, Esther's room on the second floor, and then the gentleman's quarters, which is downstairs, which is basically just like, and people who are there to do hardcore investigating will stay in the gentleman's quarters because it's just a room with like four beds in it.
Yeah.
Four doubles. So you just kind of put your equipment on the bed, and if you want to get a quick power nap, and then you're right back up and investigating. Um, it's interesting because when we went and we are talking about the potluck, and that was the first time we went.
Yeah.
And so, we didn't know what to expect, but we knew it was a bed and breakfast. So we're like, oh, we've been to haunted bed and breakfast. So we walk in and it's just, and they've done a lot of restoring since then. But at the time, we're like, wow, what is this place? And so we had, I forget which room we stayed in,
It was
Rosie's room.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, okay, so this room does have a working toilet, but don't get in the bathtub, it'll fall through the floor. And we're like, what have we gotten ourselves into? So, but by the time we're ready to leave, we're like, this is the best hotel ever.
Because that euphoria kicks in and you're like,
Yeah.
yes.
Right.
And
it's the haunted historic experience that you're going for. You're not going for a resort feel.
Oh,
No, absolutely
No.
no.
Okay, so just a personal plug here. Phantom History House is not dilapidated. We're not falling apart. So if anybody wants to stay here, you can use our tub. There's showers upstairs. So I just want to make sure I put that out there. Um, as we start wrapping up here, you have said that you've been there many, many times. We've talked a lot about the history. You shared some of your most um, s- uh, impressive or scary moments, whatever you want to call them. But I want to go back to the euphoric feel for a second, just kind of wrap up our conversation. Um, have you ever encountered, I mean, I know you've said it's never been quite like this, but have you ever been in another location where you've kind of had that party draw me back feel, or is this completely unique to the Shanley?
I've only been one other place that had a similar feeling, and it's a place where I also feel there is 100% an elemental, and that is the Conjuring House.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
I could see that. I've never been to the Conjuring House. That's one of the places she's investigated, but I haven't.
Been there multiple times. It draws you in. Um, it will, if you go in overconfident uh, and think, I'm a paranormal investigator. I'm not concerned about what's going to happen here. Whatever's there says, hold my beer. And it goes off the rails.
Buckle up, buttercup.
Yeah, that's a place that I personally feel is not for the novice investigator. It has a much harder edge than the Shanley does.
Okay.
And in terms for me, I think the place in giving, it's not a euphoric feel. I think the only other place that draws me back all the time is Penhurst, but it's a completely different feeling. It's not that, obviously not a euphoric feeling at all. It's more of I want to pay respects and homage to everybody that's there.
And Nurses Island is.
Yeah, that's more, what it is. It's like I'm going to give grace to the people that were there. But in terms of a euphoric feeling, for me, that's the only place where I go there. And when I've done the Shanley like what, 5 times, 6 times now?
Yeah, I think it's been
5 or 6 times, and every time I go there, I always say I get the best sleep of my life at the Shanley. It's like I get the best. You go there
and the beds are terrible. Man, you're just like,
they have a ghost cat. So in the gentleman's quarters, there's a ghost cat. So you'll be sleeping in the bed and you feel, yeah. So do I. That's why it's the best sleep of my life.
And so many people are so close to their animals when we have to say goodbye to them. It's good to know that they're still there in another form nearby, which
Absolutely.
a lot of people take comfort in. I know I do as well. Last question for the
Sure.
two of you, before we wrap up. I know you do all kinds of investigations, commercial, private, what have you. If somebody wants to get a hold of you or wants to learn more about you, what is the best way to get in touch with Nine Lives Paranormal?
Good. Email us at 9livesparanormal@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram. It's at 9livesparanormal. Look how easy that is. And, and same with our website, www.9livesparanormal.com. So
Awesome. Well,
very straightforward.
and okay, so I lied. One more question for the two of you.
Okay.
We just talked about a ghost cat. Your 9 Lives Paranormal. Cats have 9 lives. Is this connected?
Weirdly, I was talking about how the Conjuring reminded me of the Shanley because I saw a ghost cat at Conjuring. So I'm showing people where to park, and the front, if you've ever seen the Conjuring house, it's just a big front yard, and there's not anything around. They're not bushes or landscaping. So I looked down, and there's a calico cat. I mean, I saw the calico. I saw the colors, I saw the eyes, I saw the cat, and I love animals. I'm gonna die petting something I shouldn't have. So I said out loud, "Kitty," and then I turned to make sure the people are parking where they're supposed to be, and I turned back. No kitty. Kitty's gone.
So
Ghost cat.
circle back. Every time we go someplace, we usually find a ghost cat. The Conjuring House, Shanley Hotel. There's a ghost cat at White Hill Mansion. We always have a ghost cat. So it became 9 Lives Paranormal.
That is fantastic, and I love that. And also, we have a ghost cat upstairs in our Ouija board room, so I'll have to tell you guys that.
There you go.
Come stay. We'll introduce you.
Okay.
Well, Kara and Gail, thank you so much for talking to me tonight and sharing stories about the Shanley Hotel. It's definitely on my long bucket list of haunted places I want to visit in person. but I am totally taking you two with me to protect me whenever I do that.
Absolutely. We'll
All
keep
right,
you away from Joe and Frank.
well, thank you both so much. I appreciate you taking the time out to chat with me. And thank you, everybody, for watching this episode of Phantom History. If you haven't seen the audio version of Phantom History yet or listened to the audio version, make sure you download that as well on our website, phantomhistory.com. And again, Gail, Kara, thank you so much for chatting with me tonight.
Our pleasure.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for watching that. And remember, if you go to phantomhistory.com, you can sign up for our newsletter where you will be alerted when we have a new podcast that drops and also information about other events.